Hey there, Dango Stu here. Today's video is all about when to give up on an outboard motor, to figure out that point when replacement becomes a better option than repair. There are two closely related characteristics that are of primary concern to me when I'm making this decision. One's the age of the outboard and the other's the value of the outboard. It seems pretty obvious that it's not worth doing a repair if it's cheaper to buy a new one. You know, that sort of, I guess, goes without saying. But when you're buying a new one that's second-hand, so new to you, and it's also an old motor, I think you've got to take into account that it might be the easier option. You just take one that's not working for the same money you get one that is working, but you could be buying into a whole lot of unknown problems. So in that case, if you know an outboard reasonably well, you know its strengths and weaknesses, I do believe it is better to stick with the devil you know, so to speak. You can fix a problem, you know what the rest of the condition's like. If you're buying a new second-hand motor, who knows what sort of problems you're buying into. So the other issue with an age of a motor is that, you know, once you've got a 20-year-old motor, if the starter motor fails and you put a brand new one on, it's still a 20-year-old motor with a brand new starter motor. You know, at some point you're going to be throwing good money after bad as the problems mount up, and that's pretty much the situation I started getting with the Green Machine, as you're about to see. So I'll whip the cowling off. We showed last week how this cowling had copped a fair bit of damage, but the real problem with this is the starter motor. What I'll do is I'm going to salvage this starter motor. It's actually quite new anyway, so I'm definitely going to be keeping it. So I'll pull this starter motor off and I'll show you in behind here. So I've got the starter motor off now, and I'll come around here and I'll show you what's going on. Sorry about the bad lighting. The starter motor always had an issue engaging with this flywheel, and you can see here, this is where the starter motor bracket attaches to the block, to the crankcase here, and it's actually sheared the entire lug off. It could possibly be welded. I actually think I will try and weld it as an experiment, but cast aluminium like this, very hit and miss. I feel this happened because of some misalignment between the starter motor bracket and the flywheel to begin with, and I think the chances of welding this on and not having that alignment be even worse are, you know, very, very high. I'll show you in here also. You can see here that these are all metal filings. Something's been grinding and wearing itself away for quite a while now, and that's never a good thing. Probably the last thing, although the block would be very hard to fix, the other thing is the carbies have never been great on this outboard. It's always been running a bit lean. When I first got this outboard, these carbies were full of salt water, and a lot of just salt deposits were left there. Also, the reason I've never done a tuning your outboard or carburetor tuning video yet is that all the mixture screws on these had been completely seized, and a lot of the heads have been completely stripped off by somebody previously trying to get them out. So it was almost impossible to tune this carby. The chokes are missing, the choke solenoid was gone. So really, in order for this to be a good, reliable motor, you're really looking at, theoretically, replacing the crankcase half of the block, getting 4 new carbs, and the choke solenoid, the whole thing, and it's just starting to get prohibitively expensive, particularly for an outboard that I don't really have any huge fascination with. The gearbox on this also leaks a bit. Okay, it's just a bit of an oil seal thing, but it's another thing to do. There's also a bit of risk with some jobs. If I was to take the oil seal and the water pump off this, because of its age, there's a good chance things break along the way. So it's one thing to spend the money knowing you guarantee you've got to fix. It's another thing to spend the money without the guarantee. Same thing goes for this block. Something caused that to break in the first place, and fixing it is not going to guarantee that that original problem's gone away. If there is a bit of a misalignment somewhere, could be a slightly bent crankshaft, you know, I'm not 100% sure where it is. I haven't put a dial gauge or anything on it. But the trouble is, by the time you spend many hours, between $1,000 and $2,000 worth of parts, and maybe have something that runs, that's the reason I'm deciding to bin this one. I just can't take that lack of guarantee. And that point's going to be different for everyone. Because I use this every single day as a commuter, my wife uses it, you know, and I cop a lot of flack if it doesn't work for her. As I said, it needs to be reliable. But look, you might be on a bit of a budget. You might go out fishing, and for you, if the chokes aren't working, it doesn't matter. Look, it's hard to start, but once it starts, I go out for a day's fishing. It's all good. So it really does come down to what you're using the boat for, really. Things like the gearbox seals, for example. This boat also lives in the water 24 hours a day. If you can check your gearbox oil periodically, go out fishing for a day, you could probably live with a slightly leaking gearbox for a while. So they're all the things you need to look into. What's wrong with it? What do I want to use the boat for? What level of problem can I put up with?
Stewie, start, mate. Say goodbye.
Oh, Mercury. Yamaha Honda. Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Let's make some room.
Let's do it.
First thing I do is just take these control cables off on the Yammies. And actually most outboards actually have a cover plate here where the control cables come through the lower cowling. Once the screws are out, this plate just comes off. And then they pop out through the corrosion.
Yep.
So these are the arc clips that go through the pins that hold the control cables on. So once I've pulled that out, the cable pops off pretty easily. Something else I've got to show you here. This is the fuel pump. This plastic part had broken off this outlet. So I drilled it, tapped it, put a brass fitting in, and then put a whole lot of epoxy around it. This kind of bodge is all over this motor. There isn't a single part of here that it hasn't had some sort of dodgy fix. And so you can start to see why you end up thinking, you know what, time to go. I told you everywhere I looked on this outboard was dodgy. I just picked up that bit of metal I took out when I removed the control cables. And I remember now I didn't have one of those either. That's actually just a little bit of aluminium with some holes drilled in it, cut with a hacksaw. Everything on this motor is hacked. Everything's a bodge job. I can't wait to get a new motor. Getting the wiring undone is pretty easy. These Yamahas have these 10-pin plugs. So all you need to do to get the 10-pin loom apart is rotate the collar until the pin's lined up with the slot, and then pull it apart. Then you've got the female section going up to the front of the boat, and the male section goes to all the components in the boat. On the bottom of this drag link, I've got a 14mm nylock. It's important you have a nylock on here because if this ever comes undone underway, things get messy. Once this nut's undone, this drag link just lifts up. Motor's free, so you can imagine if this came undone underway, the motor's going to instantly flop all the way to port or starboard, depending on what sort of prop you got, and you'll probably end up overboard. Now I've got to undo the collar here. So you can see here, as I undo this collar, you can see the cable's actually rotating with it. The collar will still come up, but eventually the cable here will have so much wind up in it that it'll just turn back. We're lucky now. This is starting to stay now. If this collar doesn't move independently of the cable and keeps winding, get some vice grips or something onto this part of the cable to lock it off. Alright, so I'm just going to go and get the helm and wind the rod in. we're free. Okay, I'll grab a, I might just use an impact gun and we'll take these 4 bolts off. We're top bottom. I've taken the nuts off the mounting bolts now, but I'm just going to lift the motor up slightly just to take a bit of pressure off those bolts so I can pull them back through. Next step is just to gently tap on the ends. That'll get him, Charlie. Got that one. Grand moment. It's actually pretty firmly held on by Barnacles right now. And 6 flex maybe. Might just get a pry bar and pry it off the transom. Coming.
That's something that sounded a lot like bubblegum coming off.
Yeah, exactly. Hey!
And she's away.
We should just Sikaflexed it on in the first place.
Bolts. Bolts are for scissors.
Can you just take it up a little bit more? A little bit more. Almost there. A little bit more. Okay. Now just release it.
Yep, come down.
Slowly.
Come down easy.
I don't know if many of you have been watching from the very beginning, but the first 2 videos I did were this outboard arriving at my original workshop on the island and making this timber stand. So it's a bit of a sort of a, you know, closing the circle on those original videos. I still think it was worth doing the restoration of this one I originally did, because I mostly did it for personal reasons, just for a bit of a challenge, bit of a sort of, you know, summer project. I got 2 years out of it and it was a free motor. So in that sense it was reasonably good value, although I did spend a bit on parts too. But I think having seen all the problems, and taking this off has only reminded me how many problems it does have. The casing for the trim tilt motor's cracked, the wires have been cut and you know, resealed and taped up. The fuel pump has a problem, the gearbox has a leak, the block's cracked, the carburettors are, you know, not in great shape at all. So I think really this is a death by 1,000 cuts. There's so many problems with this motor that it really is time just to cut my losses and use it for parts. And that's fine, because there's lots more fun to have putting this boat back together. So that's our kind of number 1 job off the chalkboard now. Now I'm going to get onto that hull and bow, start repairing the bow, flip the hull over, check it for holes. It'll be a good chance to get this hull in really good shape before putting a new motor on it, because the last thing I want is for it to sink or something bad to happen with a nice new motor on it. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you sort of join us for the rest of this journey in restoring this boat. If so, I'll catch you next week. So take care, I'll see you then. Bye.